I'm joined now by Anthony Wilson-Smith. He's president of the Historica Dominion Institute, and these are the guys who make those delightful little vignettes of Canadian history. What got you started producing these?
Well, you got to go back, John, about 20 years, and in fact, it springs out of, to give credit fully where it's due, to Charles Bronfman, who's still engaged with the board today very actively. And Mr. Bronfman's conviction that Canadians didn't know enough about history and needed better vehicles to bring them forward and a way to find it more entertaining as well as educational. So he and a bunch of friends and associates, including Patrick Watson, of course, well-known broadcaster, came up with this, and off things have been going. 66 minutes later, here we still are.
I was about to ask you, there have been 66 of these so far.
66 is, we call them classic minutes, John, I guess like classic soft drinks or something. In addition, in the year 2005, there were about 5 or 6 others made that related specifically to the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II, and those are additionally on top because they had slightly different criteria for how we produced them.
And one of the things that I love about these, you know, you often get the impression, and not just from your high school teacher, that Canadian history is worthy but dull. And what these vignettes dig out is that there are a number of things about Canadian history that are both exciting and surprising. And in fact, you've got a new one here on the, at least superficially unlikely topic of black loyalists, people who left the United States for Canada out of a personal interest in not being slaves. Here it is.
When he was only 16, Richard Pierpoint was enslaved in Senegal and taken to America.
All us men have sworn on this petition to fight.
You're an old man. The British Army has militias and trained soldiers.
I fought with the British during the American Revolution.
Take your land and farm it. Leave the Americans to us.
With respect, sir. I was born a free man, and I intend to die one. Your officers fight for land and money. I fight for my freedom.
Richard Pierpoint was one of thousands of black loyalists who won their freedom in the American Revolution. 30 years later, at the age of 68, he petitioned for an all-black unit that would defend Upper Canada during the War of 1812.
Now, that's got to send a shiver up your spine. I mean, that's a really inspiring moment.
Well, I sure hope it does, John. Obviously, that's part of the intent. And I'm so glad you raised the issue of people who think that Canadian history is boring, because I always say that if you think that, you haven't taken the time to look at it properly. I mean, you haven't taken the time, you know, for them to look at it ground level and say, there are a million interesting stories, and they're all about individuals and small groups. The fact we've been blessed enough to not have a lot of wars on our foreign soil, on our own soil, is one of the reasons why, you know, people say it's boring. Well, I'm good with boring in that context.
Yeah, it reminds me of just a passage in the Narnia Chronicles where one of the people from our world comments on the fact that Narnia seems to be very exciting, and I was told, oh no, there are lots of periods in Narnian history that are just great because nothing exciting is happening. But you know, even think about things like settling Canada, because I was just at the Museum of Civilization, and I'd like to take kids to the Mountain Equipment Co-op and then to this exhibit and say, you know, how would you like to pick that up and try to tame this land?
Well, that's the thing. It's all about, you know, I think the success of telling history properly, the starting point is always about opening that door and saying, here are human anecdotes, real people, small groups, people just like you, but in a different era, conditions they face, so that the people who are watching it can say, oh yeah, imagine if I'd been living then, this is what it might have been like. Oh, I can really try to put myself in the shoes of that person, and then I realize how difficult, how remarkable that really was.
Yeah, and when you produce these minutes, how do you then get them out to the audience that ought to be seeing them, young and old, I would emphasize?
Well, you know, traditionally, of course, John, it would begin with national television exposure, movie theaters as well. And frankly, of course, you know, that's an expensive buy to get out there to do that, in addition to the considerable cost of producing them. These days, they'll be everywhere. I'm so delighted you've just shown them here, so viewers of Sun TV will see this one right away. Also, of course, available, if I may, on historicadominion.ca, our website, and a variety of other places. We tweet, we're on Facebook, we're all over the place in social media, and that's really where, you know, a lot of it is happening. If I can, just, you know, within the first 36 hours of releasing this on our website, we had about 13,000 hits right off the top.
And that, to me, is one of the things that is so important. there is a hunger for this, that people want to know whether they were lucky enough to be born here or smart enough to come here or lucky enough their parents brought them here. They want to know what the story is. They want to be part of this adventure. They don't say, oh, please spare us all that.
Well, I know, John, and the really interesting and to me encouraging thing is, in many ways, the younger you go in audience, the more the enthusiasm for the minutes. When you talk to 20, 25-year-olds, they literally, this is part of their heritage. They've grown up with the minutes. They'll say, oh yeah, I remember learning about history when I was 5 years old. I saw one of your minutes. And again, we don't pretend that by watching 66 minutes, the whole total, that you'll know everything about history. What we hope we have done by doing that is, if you've seen one or two, we've opened a door to the room where history is and said, now get in there. Look, it's interesting. Rummage around. See what you find. See if you like it.
Now, if you remember, what's the one that's furthest back in time that you've done so far?
Oh gosh, early days, we keep them not so much in chronological order, so I'd be hard to refer. We went back early to World War I causes in particular, then World War II. We had the famous Penfield one, which a lot of people know just because of the great line everyone repeats, I smell burnt toast. That was quite early in the process as well. And you know, the one thing I would say without being able to specify, John, what's interesting is, much as it is when you watch an old TV series from the 80s or early 90s measured against now, the feel is often the same, but there's just a different vibe. You know, the cutting is a little faster today, the lighting is a little bit different. They're always minutes, you always know them, but you can kind of see a shift in the continuum in the way they're produced.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about the subject rather more than when they were made. Have you gone back into, because I'm a big fan of Magna Carta, and I think it's part of our history. Mm-hmm. Have you gone in that direction, or is it going to stop with Cartier and Cabot?
We haven't. You know, about 1812 is one of the earliest dates we've gone back to in terms of pre-Canada, in effect, and we'd done the Laura Secord minute before related to 1812, which again is one of our most popular minutes. A lot of it, I'd say probably 80%, we're looking at 1867, post-1867. And the other interesting issue you raised, John, when you ask about that is, when does history stop and sort of modern day current affairs begin? I was asked that question by a student the other day. You know, if you think about 1987 and the Free Trade Agreement, is that history? Well, it's certainly a pivotal moment in time for our country. And I think the answer would be yes, it is. We haven't done a minute on it. Yes, will we be thinking about it? We'll certainly talk about it.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. As I always tell my students, don't think this is just current events.
No,
you're living through history.
Absolutely right.
Okay, Anthony Wilson-Smith, president of the Historica Dominion Institute. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks so much, John. Glad to be here.